helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformation with Michael Hart, award-winning psychotherapist, author, and Canadian certified counselor.
Welcome to the Life Transformation Show. Today's topic is the leadership style of Jesus. Leadership is a topic that affects every aspect of life, our workplaces, families, churches, and communities. But what makes a good leader? Today we'll explore the leadership style of Jesus and how his example challenges conventional ideas about power and authority. As typical of our shows, we will be looking at the topic from a biblical perspective while drawing also from psychological research on the topic. If you're new to our ministry at Elim Counselling Services and the Life Transformation Show, you can find out more about us at elimcounsellingministry.com. You can also make a tax receivable donation to elimmentalhealthfoundation.com. We have many resources on our YouTube channel and in Michael Hart's book, The Transformed Life, which you can find on Amazon. Well, joining us to unpack this topic today is Canadian certified counselor and award-winning psychotherapist and author Michael Hart. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Denise. This is such an important topic for 3 reasons. First, leadership is everywhere. In our workplaces, families, churches, and communities. No matter where we are, leadership plays a crucial role in shaping outcomes. Secondly, the quality of leadership determines success or failure in any group. And thirdly, we are all leaders in some way. Whether as a manager in the workplace, a parent raising a family, a mentor guiding others, or even just a friend influencing those around us, leadership is involved. But leadership isn't just about titles. It's about how we impact and serve others. And this is why understanding the leadership style of Jesus is so essential.
Well, Michael, leadership has been studied for centuries, and many different leadership styles have emerged. So, in your study of the topic of leadership, what sets Jesus' leadership apart from other historical or modern leadership styles?
That's such a great question, Denise. Jesus' leadership style is unique because it was transformational rather than transactional. Many historical and modern leaders operate with a transactional leadership style, where they offer rewards or punishment based on performance. This style of leadership is seen in authoritarian rulers, corporate executives, and even some church leaders who focus on obedience, control, and power. Yes, it's even in the church. But when it comes to Jesus, he embodied a transformational style of leadership. And this is a style of leadership that focuses on inspiring others, developing and empowering others. And James McGregor Burns, a political scientist who pioneered the concept of transformational leadership, described this as a leadership style that raises the level of motivation and morality in both the leader and the followers. So yes, it's not in this form of leadership, it's not just about what the end goal is for the organization. It's about the process of getting there and how you empower those who are involved in your organization or in your group. So Jesus did just that. He didn't just give orders. He transformed lives. As we read the narrative of Jesus in the Bible, we see that he developed his disciples into leaders. He equipped them to carry out his mission, and he led with love, humility, and vision rather than control and fear. So his leadership was about serving others, and he made clear in Mark 10:45, where it says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." So unlike rulers who sought personal gain at the expense of others, leaders who are selfish and focus on the material gain or the profit that it brings to them, Jesus invested in people's growth and transformation. And this is a hallmark of transformational leadership.
That's a powerful distinction, Michael. So, can you give examples from Scripture where Jesus displayed transformational leadership?
Absolutely. So here are a few examples. The first example of empowering others is found in Matthew 4:19. When Jesus called his disciples, he didn't just tell them what to do. He gave them a greater vision for their lives. He said, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." That's a vision right there of what they would become. He's empowering them. He's saying, if you follow me, I will give you the capacity, the ability to become fishers of men. So he transformed these simple fishermen into world-changing leaders, showing that great leadership can draw out potential in others. We also see the second example of that in servant leadership in John 13, verse 14 and 15. And this is one of the most striking examples of Jesus' type of leadership, in which he called the disciples and he washed their feet. In doing so, what Jesus is doing is he is flipping the traditional leadership on its head and demonstrating that a true leader serve and lead by example rather than demanding service. So Jesus completely redefined leadership. And similarly, in Matthew 20:25 to 28, he says, "The rulers of the Gentile lord it over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." And this is a key principle of transformational leadership. If you are desiring to transform the life of others, you do so by putting them first and serving them. And we see that Jesus also developed future leaders in his disciples by sending them out on the Great Commission to go and make the disciples of all nations. He did not seek to do everything himself and could not do everything himself. But we see that some leaders get so caught up in their own ego that they do not invest in others in a way that enables them and commission them to bring out the best potential that they have.
That's incredible, Michael. We should all strive to follow how Jesus leads. So you mentioned earlier that Jesus didn't just lead. He transformed his followers by developing them into leaders. If you were to highlight one key aspect of Jesus' leadership style that made him so highly successful as a leader, what would that be?
Without a doubt, I would say it was Jesus' emotional intelligence. But unfortunately, many leaders overlook this important aspect of leadership. Extensive research in psychology and business shows that the critical role of emotional intelligence, it is important for effective leadership. They say that leaders with high emotional intelligence are adept at recognizing and managing their own emotions, as well as understanding and influencing the emotion of others. And they say that this fosters a positive organizational climate and enhanced team performance. And this is very, very important. If you have a team that is not performing and there are issues with your team, maybe you need to consider whether or not there is emotional intelligence among the leadership in the team. Because having a good understanding of your emotions and the emotions of others are key factors in helping to improve team performance. So the studies found that not only does it improve the morale among workers, but it also improves the bottom line. The profitability of the company also improves when you have leaders with emotional intelligence.
We already are aware that Jesus is all-knowing. So of course, he knew about EI before all of the psychologists and business leaders. So let's go deeper. Can you give examples from scriptures where this principle of emotional intelligence stands out in the ministry of Jesus?
That's such a good question. Let's get very definite with pointing this out. So there are very clear passages that shows the emotional intelligence of Jesus. First, we see that Jesus showed emotional intelligence by being very self-aware. In Matthew 26, verse 37, 38, he approached his crucifixion with a sense that he's in touch with his emotions. When you read those verses, you get the sense of a leader who was not putting on a show, who was not behaving as if he's above human emotions. But you get the feeling from Matthew 26, 37 and 38 that Jesus is very in touch with what he's feeling. That verse starts by saying, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." That is emotional intelligence. Jesus is getting in touch with his deep emotion. So despite his deep emotional anguish, though, he did not fear or despair. He still had control. Instead, what we found is that he submitted himself to the will of God, saying in Luke 22:42, "Not my will, but your will be done." Jesus is very conscious that there is an internal conflict that's happening between his will and what God wanted for his life. And he's willing to articulate that in prayer to God, being in touch with what he's feeling. Jesus also practiced self-regulation. In John 8, verse 3 to 11, when the Pharisees tried to trap him with the woman caught in the act of adultery, instead of reacting emotionally, Jesus could have gotten mad at them for their hypocrisy. But what we found is that he was very self-contained and controlled in his response. He paused, he stooped down, he wrote in the sand and responded with wisdom by saying, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." So Jesus as a leader had this ability to stay calm under pressure, and this diffused a tense situation. But in present day situation, we often find that leaders become flustered when they're under pressure. They start yelling at others around them, and they are not in control. They're not emotionally intelligent enough to control the internal turmoil that they're feeling. In contrast to Jesus, we see that King Saul lacked this self-regulation. His jealousy of David made him act irrationally, throwing spears at David in rage, and wanted to destroy David because of his own insecurity. This is in 1 Samuel 18, verse 10 and 11.
Powerful points, Michael. Jesus' self-awareness kept him grounded in his mission, while his self-regulation allowed him to lead with wisdom rather than impulse. We can see how lacking these qualities, just like you said Saul did, leads to poor decisions and broken relationships. So what's the next key element of emotional intelligence in Jesus' leadership?
We see empathy. Jesus deeply understood and responded to people's needs. And empathy is the ability to connect with others' emotions and respond with compassion. This is an important key principle as well in leadership. In John 11:35, we're told that Jesus wept. He wept with Mary and Martha, who was mourning their brothers. He had compassion for them. When in Matthew 9:36, where it says, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. That's empathy right there. He was emotionally intelligent enough to realize what was happening with others. But oftentimes we find that leaders today, they're out of touch with what their employees are feeling. But Jesus had a deep compassion for those around them. In contrast, Saul lacked empathy. He was so self-absorbed that he didn't even care about his own son, Jonathan, who risked his life to defend David.
Oh, so yes, what you're saying, Michael, is that his empathy made him deeply connected to people rather than detached like many leaders today. So we've covered self-awareness, self-regulation, and empathy. That was a great breakdown of emotional intelligence. Jesus' leadership was truly transformational because he combined wisdom, emotional stability, deep empathy, and the ability to connect with and develop others. For those listening who want to develop these qualities in their own leadership, what are some practical steps they can take to follow Jesus' leadership model?
But I think the first step that we should do as leaders is to practice self-awareness. We see that this is very important in the life of Jesus. So self-awareness is the ability to understand your emotions, to know when you are not at your best, to be able to identify when you may need a timeout instead of talking with someone when you are already hurt or angry. We see how Jesus stooped down and wrote in the sand before answering. So as leaders, I think we often do a lot of damage because we respond in anger and in haste without thinking things through. So Jesus showed this self-awareness where he was able to delay his answer, to give himself time to think and to use wisdom. So we need to practice that self-awareness.
Michael will be right back. You have been listening to the Life Transformation Show, where award-winning psychotherapist and author Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services has been speaking on the topic, the leadership style of Jesus. You can find out more about us at elimcounselingministry.com or by calling 613-699-1677 or 1-877-204-2914. Please consider making a tax-receittable donation to this Christ-centered ministry. And the donations can be made to elimmentalhealthfoundation.com. Your donations help us to stay on the air and to provide subsidized counseling to those who can't afford it. Back to Michael.
The second thing that we need to do is to develop self-regulation and respond with wisdom, not with emotion. Leaders who lack self-regulation often react impulsively, creating stress, conflict, and broken relationships. So Jesus never allowed pressure or provocation to control his response. Everything that he did was well thought through. Even when he became angry and he drove the money changers out of the temple, we are told that Jesus' next thing is that he went to and he sat down and he taught. So Jesus had this ability to regulate his emotions. And so in John 8:3-11, when the Pharisees tried to trap him with the woman caught in the adultery, we see how he responded with that in wisdom by saying, "Let him who is without sin cast the first blow." So studies show that leaders who regulate their emotions create more stability and more productive teams, whereas reactive leaders cause stress, and they create organizations in which people cannot thrive. So we need to pause before reacting. We need to pray for wisdom in challenging situations, and we need to practice mindfulness. Stay focused and calm and give measured responses. Think before you react instead of reacting emotionally.
Again, valuable points, Michael. Self-awareness helps us lead with confidence and humility, while self-regulation allows us to handle difficult situations with wisdom rather than emotion. I can see how these principles would be transformational in family life, workplaces, and even in ministry. So what's the next way we can apply Jesus' leadership model?
I think as leaders, we need to stay motivated by keeping focus on our purpose and to lead with vision, not ego. We see many leaders who they focus on power and status or personal gain rather than on the greater mission. Jesus never sought personal recognition. He stayed focused on fulfilling God's will. And if you can stay focused on the purpose, the bigger purpose that is outside of yourself, you can become a better leader. Sometimes we allow our ego to get in the way and we lose sense of the bigger vision. In John chapter 6, verse 38, Jesus said, "For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me." Jesus was aware of the bigger purpose for which he was on earth. And so in organizations or even in friendships, even in as parents, we need to keep focus on the bigger purpose, because sometimes we can get so involved in trying to win these little battles that we lose the entire war and we destroy families or we destroy organization because we lose sense of the bigger purpose. When Satan offered him all the kingdoms of the world in Matthew 4:8-10, Jesus refused because his mission was bigger than earthly power. So studies have shown that leaders driven by mission rather than self-interest, that they're more effective, they're more resilient, and they're more inspiring. So define your mission. What is your mission? Why are you in leadership? What drives you beyond personal success? Stay focused on long-term impact. Make decisions that will outlast your position, your title, or your role. And surround yourself with purpose-driven people. Avoid distractions from those who prioritize personal gain over collective success. We also see how Jesus led with empathy, prioritizing people over productivity. And this is important because great leaders listen and care. They understand that leadership is about people, not just about result. And so leaders who lack empathy alienate their teams, they frustrate their families or their congregations because they are more focused on productivity rather than people. So we see that Jesus modeled this in John 11 verse 35, where Jesus wept with Mary and Martha. And so it's important to have that sense of empathy where you care about those around you and you listen to their needs and try to make sure that their needs are taken care of and they're not just expendables for the organization. So listen more than you speak. Ask others, how are you really doing? And mean it. Don't just ask, but mean it. Show compassion before correction. Before addressing mistake, acknowledge the person's feelings or struggle. Invest in people, not just performance. And make relationships a priority over result.
Oh, Michael, these principles really set Jesus apart as a leader. His ability to stay focused on his purpose and genuinely care for people are great aspects of leadership that makes him transformational. So, we've covered 4 key ways to apply his leadership. What's the final takeaway for our listeners?
I think a final takeaway for leaders is to build a strong relationship. Leadership is about people, not control. Leadership isn't about commanding, it's about connecting. Great leaders build strong teams, mentor others, and create lasting impact. Jesus didn't just lead. He formed deep relationship with his disciples. Jesus mentored and developed his disciples rather than giving them orders. Luke 10:1, he sent them out in pairs, showing that leadership is about teamwork, not isolation. After his resurrection, he personally restored Peter in John 21:15-17, showing that leadership includes redemption and reconciliation, not cutting people off at the first mistake that they make. Because when you cut someone out of a team for their first mistake, the other people in those teams are going to see themselves as expendables. In addition, studies in team leadership show that leaders who build strong relationships where people feel valued and cared for, that they create more engaged, productive, and motivated teams.
We've quickly come to the end of the show. Thank you for joining us today as we explored the topic, the leadership style of Jesus. Tune in next Monday morning at 9:30 when we will be looking at recovery from parental alienation. Parental alienation is a situation where one parent, often during a divorce or custody battle, intentionally manipulates a child to turn them against the other parent. If you missed any part of today's show, you can find this and past episodes on Elim Counselling YouTube channel. You can find out more about us at elimcounselingministry.com. Please consider making a tax receivable donation to Elim Mental Health Foundation.com. Your contribution will directly help those seeking support and guidance. Until next time, this is your co-host, Denise Hart.
And Michael Hart, praying together that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.